you are that person who tends to scuff a little bit on the ground, well, we are gonna work on it today. The chances are there's something that's off with your pelvic position and your core strength. So we're gonna get into the main reason why that's happening, and we're gonna address it with a running drill as well. Get ready, no more scuffing. You might be that runner that kicks rocks on the ground, trips on really small roots, quarters, pennies, the thinnest possible things you could trip on. Or you're that person who tends to really wear out the front of your shoe. And even that person who tends to see like wear and tear, like this little lip thing starts to pop off with your shoe. Those are all signs that you might be scuffing and dragging your feet. Now, when we talk about scuffing, we have to talk about the spine, what the body does, and particularly this whole middle thing does when we run. Now, the trick with running is that we're trying to channel all this energy, all these ground reaction forwards into smooth, efficient forward motion. And we don't just get, free energy return if we can't channel it correctly. And we have to really channel it correctly by controlling our body. Our spine moves a lot, whether we like it to or whether we don't like it to. It can flex forward, it can extend back, it can rotate from side to side, it can side bend, and you can start to see really ugly stuff start to happen when runners break down and get tired, which is really what we're talking about in this video. We want a little bit of movement, but we want it to be controlled, and that means that we need to be muscularly engaged and aligned for that to happen. Now, very specifically, when I can keep my hip in a nice neutral position, which means that I have to think about running with my hips forward, squeezing my butt a little bit when I run. What it allows to do is it turns my body and my hips into like a giant rubber band where I get nice, free, snappy energy return. Every time this leg swings back, this rubber band winds up so that this leg swings through nice and tight, right? Because every time this leg swings back, it's like me doing this with a rubber band right here, right? Just winds it up nice and tight. This leg kind of comes through nice and efficient, and then by the time the foot hits the ground, my body's already passed over it. Nice, silent, quiet, ninja-like footfalls. But when my movements are not as controlled, I'm not as muscularly engaged and organized, I lose pelvic position. More often than not, the pelvis dumps forward. And when the pelvis dumps forward, I lose tension in this rubber band. This rubber band starts to go away, and all of a sudden, when this rubber band goes away, I don't get as big of a pull. Instead of a big pull like this, it's kind of like a little baby one. And that's where your hip flexors start to hurt late in a race. This is where you start to drag your feet and you get into that marathon shuffle and you start to trip on things. And that's where the scuffing comes to. This leg doesn't carry back as forward as high. That means it carries lower and it starts to hit the ground while the leg is still traveling forward. That's the main problem. So the next piece we're going to talk about, hey, how do we get our ducks in a row, muscularly engaged and aligned with a core exercise, and then we're going to tie it all together in a nice, pretty bow with a running drill. So we're going to get ourselves queued up and nice, muscularly engaged with a dead bug exercise. I love this one because it doesn't add any crazy fancy stuff to what your spine's doing. It just tries to challenge your ability to maintain your spine in a nice neutral position, to build some awareness there, and then to build some strength around it, which is so huge for running, that nice quiet upper body when we run. So I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna start on my back. And these legs can just be bent for a second. The thing I'm gonna focus on first is just noticing what naturally tends to touch the ground. I've got something right along just in my tailbone. Maybe I have a little space in my low back. That mid back starts to touch, and of course my shoulder blades, my neck, and my head. I want to make sure that I'm not pressing down too hard and I'm not letting myself arch off. Nice and neutral. Now I'm going to bring my feet up here into a nice straight position. I'm going to flex my toes back. I'm going to turn my quads on just a little bit. Now from here, what I'm going to do is just slowly lower one leg, and as this leg lowers, my back's going to want to arch off the ground if I'm not controlled. So I want to make sure that this is really tight and engaged. And to help myself out a little bit as this leg lowers, I'm going to squeeze this butt and flex this quad. I'm going to come back up. I'm going to lower this other leg, hold for a second or two, come back up, and I can just alternate back and forth. Now to make this a little bit harder, I can add an opposite arm to extend overhead as well. So if the right leg extends, this left arm's going to go up overhead, hold for a second or two, come back down, extend, come back to. Now, if this is too difficult all the way down here, you can stop a little bit further up. Wherever you start to lose it, that's where this awareness game is. It doesn't necessarily have to be a ton of reps. You could do 10 reps over 30 seconds, really slow, really controlled. It's one of those things where you're just kind of, on the outside it doesn't look much, on the inside you're sweating bullets and straining hard just to make sure that you've got that nice neutral position. And if you can execute well on this exercise, it's gonna cue you really well for our run drill next. So now that we've done our dead bags, we understand that this position is here. We wanna make sure that our legs are traveling through a little bit higher than they normally would, especially when we get tired. So we're gonna use a pulling drill, and that's right, I use the word pulling. There are gonna be moments where I push off the ground, but then there are gonna be moments where this leg pulls up and over and through. It's kind of like riding a bike in a very sort of circular motion. And you can even see, just as I was showing before, that there's a push and then a pull recovery all the way through. What this is gonna look like, I'm gonna first start just standing, and I'm just gonna pull this leg straight up underneath me. And as I do this, I'm just gonna make sure that my hamstrings and glutes are just on and engaged a little bit as I do this. If I have this, I'm gonna start to jog in place, and I'm gonna focus on pulling on one side. And if I have that, I'm gonna start to travel forward, pull, add a little speed to this, pull, 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 and then I could even go every single foot. And then I could go ahead and shake out to the other side, stand tall, pull up like this, good. Now, with this one, what happens, especially here, if I'm not careful, is it tends to do a pull-push. We're not used to pulling on both sides. So even now, I'm thinking about doing little baby pulls of both legs, and then I'm just emphasizing on one side. And then if I have this, I'm starting to pull that leg up a little bit more, get my upper body involved as well. And then finally, I can get both legs pulling simultaneously. This is kind of the most natural drill. I'm gonna start to pull those heels up. Notice this isn't quite a butt kick all the way at the back, a little bit more underneath me. Kind of the difference between a high knee and a butt kick. Pulling, 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 and then I can even take off a little bit when I run. You'll notice you're gonna be very engaged to do this, to pull those legs up nice and high. It kind of forces that pelvis to be where we want it to be. A little out of breath here. I can take advantage of that natural elasticity, that giant rubber band of my upper body, and I can get myself going. Both of these exercises are things that I do on the regular. I add them, on the weekly, if not necessarily on the daily. And they've really helped me late in races, especially when I'm doing 10K to half marathon or a little bit longer, and I can feel my body starting to lose some position. I'll really think about my pelvic position. I'll do some of those pulling drills, and that'll kind of wake me up, shake me out of that marathon shuffle that I just sunk into, and get me out on the up and up, right? Which is really what we're going for. More specifically, what you could do is add a set of 10 dead bugs on the daily. Doesn't have to be a lot, not a huge commitment. You could do it right before or right after your run. It's just a nice cueing exercise to really anchor that. Great thing to add in the strength workout or the gym as well, because I know you're doing those. And for those pulling drills, as I said, sprinkle them in. Doesn't have to necessarily be a ton. They're great to do before a track workout or speed workout to get yourselves primed. And they're a great way to finish a long run when you are losing position and you just want that little dose, that little taste, little sugary taste of quickness to finish things off. Now, if you're someone who doesn't only struggle with hip position this way, but you struggle with hip position this way, and those knees start to kind of kiss and touch each other, and you end up with scuff marks on your calf, well, you are not alone, because I also made a video for you on it. It's a 5-minute running form fix. It's right over this shoulder right here. Definitely some great helpful strength and running form drills in there. Keep running, guys. I'll see you in the next video. The other thing that I'm going to explain in a second when I remember